Hello, everybody, and welcome to Big Sky Sounds. I'm Anne Harrigan, your host for today's show, and I'm here with my good friend and special guest, Chee-Yun.
Hi. So nice to be here.
Welcome back. We go a minute. We've known each other for a little bit, and we've done many concerti together, and I'm so excited, and thank you for coming back and performing this wonderful piece with us.
Oh, thank you, Anne, for having me back. I always enjoy working with you, and you make it so seamless and fun, and yeah.
Well, I'm thrilled. We've been working on the Sibelius Violin Concerto, which
Yes.
is one of my very favorite pieces, but requires a very special person to play it. First of all, it just requires a lot of soul and depth and virtuosity, but also somebody who's a great collaborator, because Sibelius didn't make it easy for the orchestra.
Not at all. It's a very virtuosic part for everybody involved. It is.
It is.
Yes,
And,
including you.
Thank you. And so it just felt so good at our first rehearsal, just, the connection that we always have. Of course, I said we've done a few things. I remember you called me the day my daughter was born, which was really special. And I think I have my first picture backstage of her, holding her, and you took that picture. So
Yes.
we've done a lot of great musical things, and we did Beethoven the last time you were here.
Yes, that's right. I can't believe that was, when we just talked about it, it was already 13 years ago,
It seems like just a minute ago. I couldn't believe it
know.
when you said that, so welcome back.
It's a good sign. I guess, when you're having fun, time flies.
That's right, exactly. So, I think many people remember you from before, but some folks may not. Have been some new audience members, but you have such a fascinating story about how you got involved with the violin and how you came here to the United States and built your career. It's just, I wouldn't say it's a Cinderella story at all, because you did all the work, but it is certainly a fascinating story. So tell us a little bit about how you became Chee-Yun.
Well, I am a very lucky girl. Let me just begin with that, because violin, I will forever be grateful to having the violin that I have now and being introduced to music and the violin itself. And I come from a rather big family. I am fourth child, the youngest of four children, and I had two older sisters. And I have an older brother as well, but my two older sisters played instrument when I was born. They were 4 or 5 years older than me. So my older sister, who played the piano, she was already winning competition. She was a child prodigy. She started when she was 3.5 or something like that. So, of course, being the youngest child, I just wanted to compete. I was very competitive. I wanted to be like my sisters, and I saw that my mother was always spending more time with them. And in my little mind, I thought, it's because they are playing instruments. I need to get to that.
There you go.
So then I looked at my, biggest competition, who was my oldest sister, and she was playing the piano. So I begged my mother, please give me the piano lessons. So my mother grudgingly agreed, because she thought, this little girl, I was only 4 at the time.
4 years old.
Yes, and she thought, please, I have 4 children, and I having a hard time keeping eye on 3 of them already. So, but I was very possessive of the piano. But we only had one piano in the house, and my older sister was competing, as I was telling you, preparing for a competition. So my mother said, okay, no more piano for you, because I would just want to practice all day long, because I wanted to get better than her.
Of course, you're your older sister.
And even though it was like I started, 5 years later. So then I remember I was very sad to give up the piano lessons or give up the piano. And then I looked at my second oldest sister, who was playing the violin. The problem with that was she just didn't like to practice. So every time she had to pick up that violin to practice, she would cry. But I love the sound, and I really, I like the way she had a very good form. So, I was like, I'm curious about that instrument. And if she doesn't want to practice it, why don't I practice it for her?
Did she give you candy or anything?
She was very happy.
Yes.
And then she wanted to be a ballerina. So she started taking ballet lessons, and then my mother was like, okay, fine, you could start on the violin. But then I didn't really practice it much. But I think it came easier to me, because first I learned to read music, playing the piano, and then just watching my second oldest sister play the violin. You know, you're just like surrounded by music all the time and watching her all the time. So I was just imitating what she was doing. And so maybe because she already had a really good form and she was taught a very good grip on the violin and the bow grip and the left hand position. So I just picked it up pretty quickly, and my teacher was very happy. And yeah, I started from there, and because I was a competitive child, my teacher thought that it would be great for me to enter competition to validate my level, because even though he believed in me, my mother didn't, because my mother didn't see me practice much. And she was worried that my poor teacher was coming to give me lessons when I wasn't prepared for a lesson.
Oh, well, she wanted to respect the teacher, I imagine.
Absolutely. Yes. So, but then I ended up winning grand prize, and I was coming from a neighborhood teacher. You know, I didn't even study with like a university teacher yet or anything like that. So after winning that competition, which was sponsored by Korea Times, so I got performance out of it. And then I was able to go study with Nam Yoon Kim, who had just come from graduating from Juilliard, studied with Yvonne Galamian, and she started her studio, and she was a young teacher, and I was one of her 5 first students. And so I studied with her for 5 years, and when I turned 13 years old, I really wanted to go to America to study at Juilliard because my sister was there, my oldest sister who was playing the piano.
Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to go to America. I was obsessed with anything American, American candies, American movies, America in general. So I was like, I need to be there. So whatever to get me there, and which was the violin. So here I am, and I got to study at Juilliard with late Dorothy DeLay and Mr. Hyo Kang and Felix Gallmer, and I love music more than anything.
You were 13 years old. You came by yourself. Did your parents bring you?
My parents dropped me off, but I got to stay. You know, I stayed with my sister, my oldest sister.
Well, your sister is like, she did this on her own. You should too.
Oh, she was not helpful. But you know what? Actually, it ended up being the biggest help because it taught me how to do my own laundry and clean after myself and cook for myself at 13 years old while studying to speak English. But it made me independent, and it made me feel good in the end. So I thanked her for being mean to me.
Well, you are actually, I know that you're close to your sisters now.
Extremely close,
and
yes.
It sounds like your mother was a really special person
She
to
was
recognize
an incredible woman, yes.
your gifts and to support you.
Yes.
Especially in some families, you know, Korean women, a career is not as valued, or education.
It was not during, when she was growing up, and she was quite a progressive woman, in her days. And my grandmother didn't really teach her, any particular skills. Mm-hmm. And my mother really missed that. And she really wanted to learn how to play an instrument. And in fact, she did tell me that when she was pregnant with me, because I told you that I have an older brother.
Yes.
So, for a Korean woman to have a son was a very important thing because sons will carry the name.
That's right.
Not daughters. So when my 2 sisters came, which was fine, but then she was desperately trying for another son, and my brother came, so she was so happy. And then my father somehow, his business was doing better, she said, and then, so they had sort of more leisure time, so my mother was able to take piano lessons. Oh. So apparently she was, and my oldest sister was taking piano lessons, and so my mother was like, oh, I'm going to learn how to play the piano, which had been my dream all my life.
That's nice.
And so I think I was introduced to music, like even when I was
in vitro.
Yeah.
So, well, it's amazing to hear that and hear the story of the power of music and how music, brought you here, how music really, impacted your mother and how important it was to her and education. And so you came here. Yeah. I mean, I still can't wrap my head around it. 13-year-old, and I can just imagine, and studying in New York City and Manhattan, managing all that, and studying with Dorothy DeLay is the most famous violin teacher possibly in the history of violin teachers. Studying with her, yes. And then also competing. And when did you get your first big break in the United States?
Well, so when I came to America, I thought I was pretty good in Korea. I won all these competitions. Well, when I came to pre-college at Juilliard, all 12, 13-year-olds from all over the world, all over the states. They were the best in their state. They were best in their countries. I was nobody. And I thought, my God, this is incredible. They are so much better than me. I have so much to catch up.
Yes.
It really motivated me. It stimulated me. And Miss DeLay was so nice. She was always almost too nice to the point. I'm like, when she says I play well, does she really mean that? Or when she says very good means you're not ready, not prepared at all. When she's almost speechless, beaming from one corner of her mouth to the other and sitting back and then going, where can I show you off to play that piece in public or have you enter a competition? That's when you knew that you've arrived with that piece. And that happened few months after I had been admitted to Juilliard pre-college and having lessons. I was studying Bhutan No. 5, and it was in almost September. I had just come from Korea, so 3 months later, I came from Korea in June, and there were New York Philharmonic used to have Young People's Concert. It was created by Leonard Bernstein back in the day, and they will feature young performers, but you would hold an audition. It was nationwide audition. Will come to New York, and there are 2 different rounds, preliminaries and finals. And so she said to me, she said, I think you should enter that audition. For her to even suggest that.
Oh, that must have been incredible.
I was so grateful. I was happy with that. Even if I didn't place anything, or I didn't even dream of placing up anything. But I ended up winning it. So then I got to debut at Lincoln Center, Avery Fisher Hall, back in the day in Avery Fisher Hall, now David Geffen Hall, with New York Philharmonic.
Incredible.
Bhutan No. 5, and because of the concerto is written in such a way that you can't really, because usually you will play just the movement.
Right.
But they couldn't break up that concerto, so I ended up playing the whole concerto and was the last performer on the concert. So it was really, really exciting. And from there on, I just felt so responsible. I thought, okay, now Miss DeLay is going to expect me to be at a certain level, and I need to fulfill that. And it was almost like, it also taught me responsibility pretty early on.
I imagine.
So in many ways, I'm extremely grateful to music, and of course grateful to my parents for giving me the opportunity and all the teachers.
That's just so amazing. So I'm trying to think of the pieces you and I have done together. I know we've done Mendelssohn, I know we've done Beethoven, but the Sibelius is different. I mean, well, the Beethoven is also a powerhouse piece, but this piece is so evocative, and you and I have been spending some time talking about the moods, and the different feelings that it evokes, and sometimes it's quite visceral, which you don't think of with a Nordic composer like Sibelius.
Right, yes.
And so there's this gypsy feel in the last movement. We've kind of talked about really digging in, and then the second movement is just so heartfelt.
Yes, and grandiose, and the orchestral writing is, he does use the full section of every instrument. When the brass comes in, it's not just horn coming in, it's a trombones, trumpets, you just hear everybody, the winds, and it is, because of that, texture is quite thick, and everybody involved in it. There's nobody is like, you can't, even when you're not playing, you cannot not pay attention. As we witnessed and we experienced yesterday. Because for you, you have to be, it's like alternating, like sometimes you're in 2, you're in 4, you're in 6, and they have to know, the orchestra has to know in which bars you're changing your meters, conducting. So it is very complicated, but the result is such an incredible, emotionally evolving music and moving, and so satisfying.
It is very satisfying, very fulfilling. And it has such an interesting opening. You tend to think of, with the Sibelius symphonies, of this mood music. I think of his watercolor painting sometimes. And really, many people know the hymn, Finlandia. you know, and so that, of course,
the lakes.
He wrote the piece Finlandia, and that's where the hymn comes from. But it's this glassy kind of mist over the water, and the violins. I was actually just watching. I like to watch performances, you know, and seeing the Berlin Philharmonic, how they move a lot, and they just kind of floated across their bows like, I don't know, fairies or something, very slow. And this sound of the violin kind of rises out of the water.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because it's kind of free form against, you know, just not even wind. I can't explain how the beginning is. It's so mystical.
It's very interesting you just said that. You know, it's like I also picture, you know, like a lot of times when I play piece of music, I connect it with an image. Imagery, it could be scenic, it could be color, it could be a character, but I have to kind of have a vivid image of it. And for me, that helps me to get in the mood, and it also helps me with the nerves.
Yes.
You know, and the beginning has to be extremely controlled in a way. It's a very long crescendo. And, you know, the orchestra comes in, you know, the violins, it's so almost like mystical, as you said. It's like foggy. It's like so, Finland, the country is like so many mass of water. It's completely surrounded by the lakes. And it often, because of that, and the misty and the foggy. So when I first visited Finland, and when I was flying over it, I thought, wow, now Sibelius makes perfect sense.
Because you have an image of the country.
For me, it's more of a like aerial vision. So when my violin is almost like I'm an eagle. I'm like two eyes of an eagle, just flying over the land and out of the lake and the massive, and then how it just completely blends into the big sky, you know, and then it gets evolved and it develops, and then it goes into the mini cadenza, which almost sounds demonic.
It does.
And he puts, you know, in the violin, and I have that solo. It's fiendishly difficult.
Well, that's the thing about this. On a lot of pieces, but I think this piece more than most is it's ridiculously difficult.
Yes.
And yet, you know, ideally you want to create this transformative experience. And, you know, I say this to the orchestra time and time again, we don't want them to see how hard it is, you know, and so you've got that brooding bassoon that comes in and these crazy rhythms, and you are flying. I'm absolutely flying up and down the fingerboard. It's just incredible. And yet the whole thing of it is that magic we create for our audiences, right? And, you know, the hours and hours of work. But Sibelius didn't make it easy. He could have actually written it to be a little easier.
And, you know, but he was never easy on himself either. This is his second edition, revised version of his concerto. So he wrote the original version a year before that, and he was not happy. And he was, I mean, from his writing, I could only imagine what kind of perfectionist he was. Quite a CD, maybe. Because, you know, a lot of times when you write a forte at the end of violin passage, you crescendo to forte. And a lot of times that will mean for us to finish big, almost like sending a big sound off.
Right.
Almost crescendo sort of lasts, right? It gets big.
But
But then he wrote
that little tiny
diminuendo,
J
meaning don't be flashy with that note. Even though I want you to arrive at that height of the dynamic, I want you to kind of let it naturally diminish.
Oh, okay, taper.
He did that constantly.
Oh, you know, that's such it's interesting. I certainly see that. So what we're talking about is, of course, the written music, and Sibelius is long dead, so we can't have a conversation. But in addition to all the notes and the rhythms that we have, he wrote all these dynamics, and they're, you know, we're sort of describing them, but they look like they kind of draw like this, and then they go like this, and they get bigger, and usually they just go like that. And his, it goes all the way here, and then just
then he tapers off on the long notes.
Right.
The only note he doesn't do that is the very last note of the last movement. you know, it's kind of race to finish.
Yeah, it is a race to the finish.
Yes,
Yes.
after all that,
You know.
like incredible primitive kind of dance, you
It
know,
is.
heavy dance movement, and very, you know, it's a muscle piece. And I used to joke about, I'm like, you know, when I'm playing this piece, I could eat whatever I want.
Exactly.
Because it's
You can
like,
put your
you know, I don't
workout.
have to go on a diet nor exercise. Because
Oh, let me tell you, I have my Apple Watch, and I was like, "Yep, rehearsals, we're good."
right, you're burning
No.
calories.
And you know, it's funny. Somebody was asking just today if you, when you look at the music, can you see it? And you can, and I can. And now we have the benefit of rehearsals, but we don't have the benefit of the composer. So we have to imagine and put our pictures in. I mean, and so it's so interesting that you look at these symbols, really.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very archaic symbols in classical music. There's dots, there's dashers, there's little accents, you know, there's these Italian words that we still use for how fast or slow to play. And it's all very subjective. But what's fun about it, I mean, we haven't seen each other for 13 years, and we just jump right into it, and it's like this incredibly intimate, I can say that, dance.
Yes.
You know, in which we have to get to know and this, for us, I prefer to have a soloist come for 3 rehearsals. Mr. Leon Fleischer, he taught that to me. I had the opportunity, he was one of the most famous pianists of his generation, and I knew him because I'd studied at the school that he taught with, and I asked him once, I had the guts to ask him if he'd come and play with me. He says, yes, but only if I can do 3 rehearsals. And traditionally, it's usually 1 or 2, and so you really have to, you know, throw it together. But there's an excitement to that because it's like speed dating kind of, you know.
That's right.
But you really have to open your heart and be very tuned in to each other while still doing your job, which is you know, playing this unbelievable piece, and me, you know, connecting the orchestra. And so it's very exciting, and you can sort of see, especially with the Billings Symphony, which I feel like has very big open hearts.
Yes.
And so you see them watching, and you see their body language, that we're all making this music together. And we don't practice every week. I don't know if people realize that. We have people who come in from all over the country, and we have our first rehearsal on Tuesday, and then we go Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we have 4 rehearsals. That's 10 hours, not including breaks, in which to put together this music. So everybody practices their music ahead of time. They know it. But there's 70 people on stage.
Yeah.
They're coming from New York, they're coming from Missoula, they're coming from California, they're coming from Indianapolis or from some small town, you know, all over the place. And the music brings us all together.
Power of music.
It is. And we don't have
Yeah.
time to talk. There's no time to talk hardly, you know.
Yeah.
So
we
just
talk through the music,
Yeah, we do.
communicating, and that brings us closer. And also because, like, Sibelius was he was so detailed, as you
Yes.
talked about, all these symbols, and then he will throw the words, you know, like there's the one section when it goes into that 6.
Yes.
And when I have the 6 chords.
Oh, it's beautiful, yeah.
And that right before, when I play that, right at the top of that theme or that music, he puts in Italian, affectionately, affrettando, and with affection, with love. And it is very difficult harmony, and it's high up on the violin. It's very noticeable to play in tune, and it's all the flats. So it's kind of more sonority to it. I always make that emotional connection sometimes with the flats against the sharps. And again, I mean, it's so well written, and he expected so much from musicians, and I feel like when we try to live up to that expectation, and in the process, we fall in love with it over again. It is one of the masterworks in that every time I revisit this piece, I feel like I'm growing a little bit more as a musician. And it is every time that much more challenging, and it never fails to make me practice. And, you know, you lose weight at the same time.
Exactly, that's great. Well,
Thank
I think,
you, Mr. Sibelius.
I think that's one of the exciting things about being a musician. I mean, doing new music, but also taking, kind of paying forward the legacy of this incredibly talented, a genius man who poured out his heart onto these pieces of paper, dots on the page, and you talk about them, bringing them to life and sharing it with the new generation. A sound that's so unique. It's hard to describe, but there really is nobody who sounds like this one man, Sibelius.
Yes.
You know, there's not a single person who has written before or since, and he never heard the piece before he wrote it. He pulled it out of his head.
Incredible.
He put it on paper, and here we are. And so we're trying to, you know, bring this to life. It's so exciting to do it and get the moods and tell the stories. So it's a lot of fun to do it. It's great to share, and I think it's why musicians. I call it the anti-Alzheimer's drug. You know, it challenges us. And this is why you can play for a long time.
Yeah.
So
and you know, it is true though. Like, we don't like it too easy, because you know, people do get bored. You always say, I want to have a simple life. What is really a simple life?
Yes, it's true.
And you're going to get bored of it. So then you want to always challenge yourself. Even though you say, oh, I don't want to have to work. But in the end, it is satisfying.
It is.
And so it is getting, you know, and it inspires me every time I pick up the violin and then I feel like I'm doing something good for humanity, and definitely for myself too. But you know, when I could bring the music like this, and when you program it for your community, and I play in front of your loving and supportive audiences, you know, then it makes it so much more satisfying and worth it for me, you know. And so therefore, I'm so grateful.
So what do you say to, you know, the kids? You know, of course, we have the Billings Youth Orchestra now, which is so exciting. It's part of the Billings Symphony family, and I remember when I started, and you know, I've never ever got to the level that you were at when you were 13, but I remember when I started, it was just god awful. My brothers talked about cats dying, you know, and so the violin is a difficult instrument to start on.
Yes.
And so, what do you have to say to young people today about getting involved in music, in violin or orchestra or choir, and what, you know, it's tough, but.
It is tough, but I think music opens one's eye to many different possibilities in life. Not just playing an instrument. And you know, it's often, I always say that musicians should not have tunnel vision. You know, you could also learn a lot of things. And to be a better performer, and when you actually live your life. So always have your eyes way open, you know, always be curious and open to ideas. And yes, starting on the violin instrument itself is very challenging. So perhaps, you know, maybe something else. I mean, you don't have to start on the violin. Start on something that's more, it could be piano, it could be drum set, you know, starting with the rhythm.
Just start, right?
Start anything. Go to symphonies, have an open mind. Even if you fall asleep,
just come.
Why not? Just because, you know what? It's going to make you feel more relaxed. Don't you rather want to be relaxed and feel tense?
Well, thank you for sharing your gifts with us this weekend. I'm Anne Harrigan. I'm your host for Big Size Sounds. This is Chee-Yun, violinist, and we are so thrilled that you're here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.